All right. Hi, everybody. So my name is Jamie, and I'm the chair of the Dalhousie Student Union, and I'll be the chair for the annual general meeting today. Before we begin all of our council meetings and all of our annual general meetings with a land acknowledgement. So I will read that now. And just so that everybody's aware, the agenda and reports and documents for the meeting are available on the DSU website. So the land acknowledgement. The Dalhousie Student Union acknowledges that Dalhousie University and the Dalhousie Student Union building are located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The DSU wants to acknowledge that the ongoing impacts of colonization are present on campus and in the Halifax community. This is reflected in a number of ways, including but not limited to the underrepresentation of Indigenous students enrolled in the university, ongoing racism faced by Indigenous people, the disproportionate number of Indigenous people in the judicial system, the high number of Indigenous children in state care, a chronic lack of basic services available to Indigenous communities, the failure of government to honor treaty rights, and the disproportionate levels of violence faced by Indigenous women. The Dalhousie Student Union recognizes and respects the Mi'kmaq people as the traditional keepers of this land, with valuable coded knowledge regarding its use and value, and seeks to honor the relational treaty process in its programming, events, and meetings. And we also have an equity statement that we like to begin with. So I'll read that. Student union solidarity is based on the principle that all members should be able to participate equally in their union, recognizing that students have diverse experiences of privilege and marginalization. As members of the Students' Union, mutual respect, cooperation, and understanding are our goals. We should neither condone nor tolerate behavior that undermines the dignity of any individual or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. It is our collective responsibility to create an inclusive space for discussion and dialogue. Any form or forms of discrimination and/or harassment will not be tolerated, nor will hate speech rooted in, but not limited to, sexist, racist, classist, ableist, homophobic, or transphobic sentiments and/or remarks. We all have an obligation to ensure that an open and inclusive space free of hate is established. If you violate this understanding, you'll be asked to leave. So the agenda for today's meeting can be found, like I said, on our website, as well as the link has been posted in the comment section. We'll be responding to questions posted in the chat, and your questions will be published for all attendees to see. So if you'd like your question to be added to the speakers list, please put SL in front of your question or type the word speakers list in capital letters followed by your name and your question. If you have what we're going to call a general question, then please put GQ in front of your question as well as your name. And all questions, just so everybody's aware, must be published with your name, so don't click anonymous when posting your question, otherwise it won't get answered. So we're going to begin with our call to order, but just looking at our numbers, unfortunately, we do not have enough members in attendance to constitute quorum for this meeting. With this in mind, I'll move forward with this meeting as a forum. This means that we'll proceed with the presentations, the executive reports, and the question and answer period, but will not be able to make any formal motions or conduct any kind of official business of the union. But the recording of this forum will still be posted on the website and available for everybody, like it would be if it was a general meeting with quorum met. So if anybody needs a refresher on the question kind of protocol, that's in the chat now. And I'll just kind of go over everything just one more time, just to make sure that everybody understands. So all documents are posted on the website, on the AGM page on the DSU website. The codes of engagement are in the chat, so SL for speakers list and GQ for general question. And just to reiterate, you can't ask questions anonymously, and any questions that are submitted anonymously, unfortunately, will not be read. But you can, if you accidentally post anonymously, you can reiterate your question. Just turn off the anonymous function. So we're going to have a look just at the agenda as it stands now. So since we haven't reached quorum for this meeting, we are going to proceed directly to the presentation of the audited financial statements by the auditor. We'll have our executive reports. This will include the report of the president, the report of the vice president internal, the report of the vice president finance and operations, report of the vice president academic and external, and the report of the vice president student life. And there will be a question and answer period later. If any questions that come up are more pressing or kind of in the moment, then as they're added to the speakers list, we'll get to them. But otherwise, questions will likely be saved for the Q&A. Okay, so though the auditor presentation is listed first on the agenda, just based on scheduling currently, the auditor is not here as of this moment, so we're going to proceed to the executive reports first to give them time to arrive. So we're going to start with the executive report of the president, and so that is Maddie. So Maddie, go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Maddie. I'm the Dalhousie Student Union President. So I'm just going to go over my report with everyone. It's on the website, so if you'd like to pull it up, follow me along. I will also go over everything in a pretty good amount of detail. The beginning of my report starts with DSU executive priorities. This is, if it looks familiar, it's because it's the same information that I gave our Board of Governors earlier this year. So our executive has identified several key topics that are going to guide the DSU's action and governance over the year. Those things are organizational and environmental sustainability, student mental health and well-being, affordable and meaningful post-secondary education for all students, campus consent culture and survivor support, student engagement, community connection and transparency, and support and representation for queer, trans, two-spirit, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and other marginalized student populations in our membership. And these themes represent the needs and wants of our diverse student population as they relate to the DSU, our mandate, and the greater Dalhousie community. The next section of my report is my personal year-long goals. So listed in this section are several action points that are going to develop over the course of the year. It's not an exhaustive list, but it is a list of the largest projects that are taking place in my portfolio this year. Notable changes to things I talked about when I was running and at the beginning of the year are due to COVID-19. The first point under the fall here talks about running an organizational audit to find out how we can optimize ourselves and better serve students. Because our operations have changed so much because of COVID-19, we didn't think that it would be effective to run an organizational audit at this point. So in place of that, the Bylaw and Policy Review Committee, which is chaired by me, is going to be revising and editing all of the governing documents of the DSU. So that is all of our bylaws, all of our operational policies, all of our terms of reference. And that work is going to occur over the entire course of the year. I'm also working on a review of the liquor policy, which takes place in part with the Student Affairs Office and the Alcohol Advisory Committee. And that is a plan for ensuring that bar services on campus are maintained and that we've switched to a new long-term sustainable plan. Building upon what was done last year with the DSU strategic plan, I'm going to be working on that with BPRC as well to implement a mission and a vision statement and continue on building 5, 7, and 10-year goals. This just will make that package a little bit more viable long-term and increase its efficacy. And under my portfolio as well, we'll be working with groups on campus to foster a space where our population is celebrated, supported, and safe. So that's going to be in coordination with a few other executives, bodies on campus, and committees, and that work will take place all year long as well. The next section is internal affairs and DSU committees. So the internal operations, like I mentioned earlier, and procedures have shifted a lot because of COVID-19 and how it's impacted our campus life. The executive and staff, though, have taken a lot of different avenues to ensure that we're able to fulfill our mandate, provide services and supports for students, and play a role in a safe and healthy community. Orientation Week was a really great example of that. The DSU was able to welcome thousands of students to campus through interactive and hybrid programming, and we're going to continue to adapt guidelines about what we can do, especially in the Student Union building, as industry and provincial standards develop. I also mentioned this briefly, but the Bylaw and Policy Review Committee is one that I chair, and we're going to be reviewing all of the governing documents as well as the bylaws. You might notice that bylaw changes and amendments were not noticed for this AGM, and that is for a few reasons, but mainly we just want to make sure that we can give you meaningful amendments, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to do so. So we are going to be holding a secondary AGM in the spring semester to introduce those bylaw amendments, and that is when our membership will have the chance to make amendments and vote on those changes in a democratic way. So if you were concerned about not seeing bylaw amendments here today, that's why, and that's what's happening. We're also working on creating a few new policies and developing the strategic plan, like I already said. And so those things will come to DSU Council as the year develops. The next section is Board of Governors and Senate caucuses. These groups have only both met a few times this year, but they've already contributed quite a few significant motions. BOG Caucus spent a significant amount of time this summer advocating for or advocating against the rise in tuition and for better student supports, especially amidst COVID. And the Senate Caucus has done a lot of work on things like amnesty requests, advocating for students when it comes to student ratings of obstruction, and being a spokesperson for student services and rights on campus. When it comes to university affairs and committees, the DSU continues to collaborate on a bunch of things, those being COVID-19, return to campus, alcohol and bar services, student fees, tuition, academic planning and accountability, student supports and services, and ongoing involvement in community initiatives and movements. Something notable happening in the Student Affairs Office is that the last Vice Provost Student Affairs, Ivan Joseph, has left. So the new Vice Provost Student Affairs is Verity Turpin, and she will be welcomed by an Assistant Vice Provost Student Affairs on October 15th. So that's coming up quite quickly. And when it comes to our external and broader community, the Dalhousie Student Union still remains in a prospective membership with the Canadian Federation of Students, and that began last year. But the DSU has been listening to the membership over the past year, and there have been concerns and support on both sides for joining. So the executive has decided to proceed with a referendum vote, hopefully held this spring, that will allow members to decide what relationship the DSU will pursue with CFS. So until the time that a neutral, information-based referendum can be held, which is tentatively this spring, the DSU executive has decided not to engage in any long-term or large-scale partnerships with CFS. And the last section, which is government and media, the DSU continues to represent the membership, and as the president and spokesperson of the union, I do a lot of that work. So we continue to play conversations this year there's a specific focus, especially on COVID-19, student-related issues, and discussing tuition and fees in Nova Scotia. So those are the large things happening in regards to our external community. I will note a few upcoming dates that are especially important. This month, we are going to be hosting a by-election, so there are several positions for the DSU Council that are available. Those include the Board of Governors, second representative, the Women's Rep, and a few others. So nominations for the DSU by-election will open on October 5th, and the voting period for that will be October 21st and 22nd. So before the end of this month, hopefully we have all of those spots filled. So I would encourage you to participate in the by-election. If you're interested in getting involved with the DSU, we would really love to have you participate with us. So that is it for me, and I will give it to the next presenter.
So I'm just gonna speak really quickly just to introduce the next presenter, but before I do, Just to remind everybody, or not to remind, I apologize, I probably didn't mention this earlier. If anybody has questions on any of the executive reports, please put them in the chat and we will do them all at once at the end of all of the executive reports, just so we don't have too much back and forth and we can get it all done at once. So next, we're going to move on to the report of the Vice President Internal. So Hannah, go ahead.
Hi there, everyone. Like Jamie said, my name is Hannah. I'm the Vice President Internal for the DSU this year. I use she, her pronouns just for reference. And I guess I will begin with my report. It is also uploaded. I will say that I did mine a little differently than some of the other execs. I did it by month. I just found it a little bit easier to organize and folks can see sort of the developments of the work I've been doing over the past few months. So I guess to begin with May, I did spend a lot of time transitioning myself and getting familiar with the internal processes and personal duties and goals that I wanted to complete for the year. But some notable things that I was doing that month were sending out the re-ratification forms. So this began in the first week of being in office. We sent those out. We sent them out to the primary contacts of every society from last year, and that was the way that we did them this year. It seems to have been a pretty good system so far, although I have had a lot of extra emails from folks that haven't either seen the email or haven't seen the website showing the way that we are doing ratification this year. So that is something to keep in mind for next year for in my report for the new executive. And there was a lot of work done in the summer over the new website. So being a lead on the communications team in the DSU, I spent a lot of time helping the website, or for most part configuring the societies page myself. And so that did take up a few weeks of time. And then I also jumped right in and was part of the student accessibility bursaries. I am the chair of that committee. And we met, majority over the summer, we met twice a week, and then it dwindled to once a week, and then now it is bi-weekly, just in order to be with our check run schedule and a direct deposit schedule, as well as we have a lower number of applications now that everyone has sort of settled with COVID too, because that was a large portion of our applicants were looking for more financial support during COVID. I did a lot of my year-long planning during that month as well, and we began our Society Expo planning when I first joined. As well, there was a little touch on the communications policy that was raised by our communications coordinator about the way that interactions happen on our social medias. So that was something we amended over the summer through council, just to fit with a more appropriate online guideline. So I will jump into June. I sat through a student experience committee that was reviewing the new DAL mobile app. So this is beginning stages of that. I did work heavily on the annual survey this month in June that where it was developing or reviewing the questions that were posted for this annual survey, and I have a later presentation that I will show showing some of the results from that survey as well. But a large majority of my time from then on was figuring out how to format it, what platform to use, what incentives we can get for folks to answer so we can get some good feedback, and then later figuring out how to make an appropriate report for that. Again, I worked on the website, and I continuously worked with our Student Accessibility Fund Committee. But then we also, or I guess I also started chairing the Society Review Committee. This is the first time we met, and we meet every month to review faculty and levy societies that do apply to re-ratify with us. So that is consistent work going on throughout there. Again, with the Society Expo, I had been doing some work with that. Office's Steering Committee was, we had our first meeting in June as well. This is a committee where we connect with our offices like DSAS, DSUSO, and the Equity and Accessibility Office, just to help have some more communication between our offices that run through the DSU. And I also began sitting on the Accessibility Advisory Committee, which is a committee within DAL. However, they did cancel quite a few meetings during the summer, so we didn't meet very often. And then I also took part in some of the hiring committees, so there was a lot of time spent sitting on quite a few committees for that month. But I also began doing personal constitution checks, which is something that I continuously do still now. And they do take up a significant amount of time. I figure that last year, the old VPI had their commissioner do it, but given COVID, we didn't have the ability to hire commissioners in the capacity that we're used to. So I began taking this work on myself, and it has taken up some of my time throughout the weeks. July, sort of similar stuff. I was working the annual survey, the Society Expo. I began doing a majority of DPI ratifications, is what I like to call them, is where I just go in myself and review the constituent societies and the general interest societies that apply to re-ratify with us or to be new societies. And I make sure that they all check out with our society policy, so I am following our appropriate bylaws with that. And there is another Dalhousie committee that I was also taking part of, the classroom planning committee, but they too canceled quite a few during the summer because of COVID and the no need to meet. The bursaries were also ongoing. I started sitting on the International Student Emergency Bursary as well. I was not the chair for this committee, but it was something that I did take part of. And then later on in the summer, I also joined the ENA Bursary Committee, which reviewed for COVID relief. One of the projects I had worked on for July was a crisis flowchart, which is something that I wanted to take initiative with during our new development of Unlearn, which is something that the DSU started with communications, the ENA office, the Black students representative, and the Indigenous students representatives. And we began focusing on making content for how to ally and better being able to showcase resources for Indigenous and Black students, as well as maybe introducing some showcases on our socials. And this committee is still ongoing, but we did take a halt on this committee for a few weeks just because of O Week and all the other projects that were up and coming. There is something to note too. Anti-oppression training is something that is written in our bylaws for faculty and levy society presidents to complete. So I spent quite a few weeks and a few meetings spending time on figuring out how to find an appropriate presenter or creator for that. So we did have a plan to have the ENA office and NSBurg collaborate on making that. However, due to some other projects that came on, there was a lack of time. And we found another solution which should be ready for us in October. So there was quite a delay on that. And then again, I was sitting with some of the regular committees that I had mentioned before. August, I had mentioned my constants again, so I won't repeat those, but I did begin working on a constitution template for the faculty and levy societies. I noticed a trend throughout doing my own SRC constitution checks that some of the constitutions for our own societies needed a little work. So I figured I would make a template document for those folks to review and look at their own constitution so that ratification processes can be even quicker than they are right now for next year. And that should be released shortly. I also completed a grants how-to document for the societies so that they're able to know what resources they have for funding and for events and programming that they would like to put on throughout the year. So I don't quite know the capacity that has been used so far, but I'm waiting for our sponsorship coordinator to add some sponsorship guidance to the end of that document, and I will put it on the website and let all of our societies know that that is out there for them. And then there was a lot of time spent reviewing some of the annual survey responses that month as well, and I will show you the data for that just after I review September. So currently, or more recently, I've been working again, on the annual survey work, I've joined another Dalhousie committee, which is called OCRET, which is something I joined with the VPAE. They look to approve changes, creations, terminations of academic units is what they're calling, basically for colleges, majors, courses, etc. So that is something that we have joined. We did a lot of health and safety meetings in order for sub preparation for reopening. And then O Week happened in September, so that is something that I'm sure the VPSL will talk about. And again, we hosted our Society Expo. It was pretty successful. There are some key points that we're going to be considering for winter, because it is the first expo that we have hosted online. So there wasn't a whole lot of interaction, but we still had some good interaction with the Society Expo. Some societies did get people to sign up. Folks had events that they hosted, and we also offered incentives for people to take part in that. So we're just going to take some notes from how this went in September so that we're able to have a little bit more of a flourishing expo in the winter. I did start my first initiative. Something that I ran on was communication, and I addressed that in the summer with the annual survey, for one thing, taking note of what our students are wanting, and then as well with the society email update is something that I'm taking initiative for, sending consistent updates to our societies to let them know what is going on that does affect them through the DSU and opportunities that may arise. And currently I am working on a society policy review, just making some little edits here and there, not changing a whole lot of things so far, but it is just a draft and we're just editing some things. And then as well, a student accessibility fund committee policy. I have written bylaws, I think, in my report, but that is something that I'm working on right now in order to have an official document for the society or for the committee to run on. And then I've made a little note that there are a lot of emails that I'm sure each executive does get, so we do spend a lot of our time answering those, and I consistently have quite an influx of those. So I wanted to make a note that even if it doesn't look like I'm doing a whole lot of projects, I am consistently in communication with people that reach out to me. So I will touch on the bottom of my document. I'm not sure if folks have that open. But on the bottom of my document, I have my executive goals for the year split up by semester. So in the summer, I had released the annual survey, and the annual survey report is just being finalized for our council soon, and I will show you a presentation of that again at the end of my presentation here. And planning for the Society Expo for online, that was another project. Releasing the Constitution template. It's a little behind, but we're still pretty much on track with that. And it's just in its final stages of drafts, so I'm just reviewing it again before I'll put it on the website. And then the website was something else I was working on in the summer. So for the rest of the year, I am looking to do a lot more planning for society-based events. That looks like the expo in the fall, planning for that in the fall, but doing it in the winter, as well as in the winter having a society mixer just to get some more collaboration between societies and getting them intermingling. And then I did notice something that I will touch on later with the report, but our annual survey did have quite a good amount of feedback, but obviously not all of that indicates positivity. So with that, I wanted to create a document for our students called What is the DSU, just encompassing a lot of basic information needed to be able to interact with the DSU appropriately, as well as know exactly what we are doing on an annual or yearly or monthly basis. So that will include things like fee breakdowns, how our services are operating, where your money is going, internal processes, things like that. And that will hopefully be released in the winter for new students that come and join us in the second half of the year. And that will also probably be put on the website. And some of the things that I did notice when running and with the annual survey feedback is that some folks wanted to separate the sub-prayer space from the wellness space and have two distinct areas for that. So that is a project that I will be working on this fall to see where we can have an appropriate space for both in the building. And likewise, I'm also facilitating conversation with Loaded Ladle and some of the DAO contacts that I have to be able to bring a Loaded Ladle program to Sexton and for them to have a space there to cook and store food. And then like I said, I'm currently writing the Student Accessibility Fund Committee into the bylaws. And then winter, I have noted that there is a project that the DSU president and I wanted to work on together with DISC, the Indigenous Students Representative, and other constituents to formulate an Indigenous Students Issues policy, just to be able to touch on some of the issues that they face regularly and ways that we can plan long-term to be able to support them further. And then I have the annual survey again. I wanted to rework some of the feedback that I was getting on some of the questions and be able to release that on appropriate time because the 2019 survey, 2019-2020 survey was released fairly late. So that is something that I'll be working on near the end of my term. Likewise, I wanted to introduce an annual society survey just to get feedback personally for the VPI and the internal processes of ratification and things like that. So there's an appropriate line of communication to be able to rework some of the processes that the societies have to go through in order to be under the DSU. And then finally, have the Sexton Advisory Committee also be written to the bylaws because there isn't a policy on that. But just for reference, I will now be sharing my annual survey presentation. I'm not sure if, hold on, I'm not sure if that's being shared yet. I will assume so. Okay, yes. Right, so the annual survey, this is a summarized report from our policy and governance coordinator. They put this together for me to be able to show here at our AGM, and they did a lot of really good work summarizing some of the data and getting some demographic data as well. So here's our presentation overview, but I won't necessarily go over it. So it was introduced in 2018 as a way to collect information about our members and the priorities, but I also find it a good way to introduce a straight line with incentives for folks to be able to give us feedback on the year if they are not heavily involved in the way that the DSU operates. So it ran this year from July 3rd to August 3rd, and we received about 1,200 responses, sorry. So the trends, they fairly well aligned with the demographic percentages at Dalhousie itself. So by that I mean we had an appropriate response amount. So say there was 13% undergraduate at Dalhousie, we had probably about 14%. So they lined up pretty well. So we can say that it's that our data is somewhat representative of what the actual Dalhousie community is looking for. So approximately a third of the respondents were BIPOC folk. That includes Black, Indigenous, and people of color students, while approximately 45% self-identified as white students and 22% did not specify or preferred not to say. 15% of the responses self-identified as members of the LGBTQ+ community and 0.1% self-identified as students with disabilities. And so those are the graphics that we do see. With the platform that we used was an Airtable form, and with that it was able to provide us with some instant data such as pies and charts. And so you can see that representative at the primary campus is Studley, but we did have a few next one was Sexton, and then undergraduate was one of our larger respondents, and full-time students as well. So this question was, are you an international student? And then we had about a quarter of folks say yes, and roughly 3/4 say no. So this is representative of domestic students. And our racial and ethnic identities. So we did have a majority of white students, but we did have a second majority of students of color, and then a larger majority of unspecified. And then again, with our 2S LGBTQ+ identity, quite a large majority being cisgender and straight, and then the quarter of that's either identifying or not. So our financial matters, we did ask a question about debt that folks expected to pay. 71% of those were expected to pay some debt upon graduation, with 48 of those expecting to owe over $30,000. So I won't, this presentation is fairly long, so I won't go too much in detail, but I'll have this posted. If it's not already on the website, I'll have it posted on the website later. As well, later we will have reports, our full detailed reports with all the analysis on the website, hopefully by November or whenever I review it with council. And so those are the pie charts representative of that. All right, so DSU involvement, 96% of the respondents said they attended at least one DSU event, mainly Dalfest, Society Expo, and O Week. 70% were involved in elections by either voting or in some other capacity, being involved in campaign team or being a candidate. 25% were involved with student societies, and 14.3% are volunteered with or were employed by the DSU. So I'm just going to go through these. This is quite a lot of information, and I would like for other folks to review their reports. So event attendance, most common reason for attending was to have fun, followed by to feel like I'm part of the Dalhousie community. Most common was that they didn't have enough time to attend events, or they didn't really know how to become involved. I think not noted is that some other folks just, their friend groups were not involved in certain events, and therefore they did not involve themselves either. Among students with disabilities, physical or mental health difficulties hindered participation too, was the second most common reason for not attending DSU events. Awareness, belonging, and satisfaction. The survey showed a correlation between awareness of the DSU and what it offers and satisfaction with those offerings. Those who understand what the DSU offers are far more likely to be satisfied than those who do not. Most respondents feel that they are part of the Dalhousie community and that they are supported in their academic program. So about the top 2/3 of the priorities here are listed. Oh, sorry. So our student union building, a vast majority of the students based on Halifax campuses visited the sub. 43% visited over 50 times during the year. The top 3 reasons were for the food court, the bookstore, and the study space. 89% of Halifax-based students were somewhat or very satisfied with the sub, and 88% of those who had visited the sub food court were somewhat or very satisfied. Communication. So most respondents noted that the DAL email was their #1 way of hearing about the DSU for events, information, and opportunities. This is the way of communication that we use for elections as well. Written responses emphasize the importance of engagement on social media platforms, particularly Instagram as our main one, and then Facebook as the secondary. Written responses contained helpful suggestions that have been shared with our communications team, and that those will be detailed in the very full report that will be posted later. And so our top written response themes, DAL email as a central communication method, Continued or increased use of social media platforms, increased class talks, tabling, and in-person announcements, and some others that I won't touch on based on time. Employment and volunteering, while only 14.3% had worked or volunteered with us, 75% of the workers agreed that the DSU is a good place to work or volunteer. Among past employees and volunteers, the DSU volunteer opportunities got generally higher ratings than work opportunities. Priorities and direction. When asked to name the topics most important to them, most respondents chose education cost, and that may be noted given the increase in tuition this year, mental health as a secondary, and cost of living. Students also had space for written responses, which outline key actions for the DSU to take to support students, and these responses are divided into advocacy, events, and internal priorities. So the advocacy themes were increase advocacy against tuition, advocate for improved accessibility and mental health services, take action to support BIPOC students and to challenge racism and xenophobia, lobby for improved on-campus work options, call for improvements to physical spaces on campus, and lobby for international student support, and call for improvements to academics in general. And events were that they wanted to see an increase in frequency, increase opportunities for socialization and community building was a large one, especially during COVID, I would say. Hold a wider variety of events. Some folks felt that some of the events that we do not align with their interests. Increase accessibility and diversity event delivery, and promote and support society events. And then internal themes were communication and transparency, which is the main reason that I added what is the DSU booklet to my list of executive goals for the year. Connect with distance students in Sexton, Carleton, Agriculture, and Yarmouth campuses. More ways to get involved. Emphasis on equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion. Prioritize mental health programming. Make improvements to the sub physical spaces. And engage with underrepresented communities. And then continued, advertise and expand services, support new students and newcomers to Canada, improve union governance, expand financial aid, and support societies. And so if there are any questions to that, folks can send those into the chat, I think. And that is the end of my presentation.
Alrighty, so before we move on, I'm just going to answer a couple of questions that we've had coming in the chat. Specifically, first we have a call for quorum and just information on quorum at this meeting. So we had a member wondering how many people are actually attending the meeting, what quorum would constitute, and if we reach quorum. So we have not reached quorum for this meeting. We have 12 people currently attending the meeting. And quorum based on the Dalhousie student population would be 190 students. We did have 21 people registered for the meeting, but there are discrepancies in how many people register and how many people actually show up. However, if anybody knows of anybody that is interested in viewing the meeting, it will be posted as a recording on the DSU website afterwards. So if anybody wishes to watch it later, that's always available. And then secondly, we had a question regarding what motions would have been discussed if quorum had been met. And as Maddie touched on, we didn't actually have any bylaw amendments or anything of that nature noticed for this meeting. The only voting item that was actually on the agenda was the approval of the minutes of the 2016 AGM, which was the last AGM that we had that reached quorum. So that is the only voting motion that is not included on the agenda for this meeting, just because we haven't reached quorum. So what we're going to move on to now, we're going to have the report of the Vice President of Finance and Operations, and the way that this is going to work is that the VPFO ESA will present their report, and as part of their report, we're also going to have the auditor come on and speak. And the way that we're going to do questions at the end. Is just that we're going to have all the exact questions at once, and we'll see if anybody has any questions for the auditor.
Okay, hi everyone. I will keep my report fairly short so that we can get to the presentation from the auditors. So just a quick overview of my exec goals and an update on their progress. A huge piece of feedback that I had from last year was that the audit process for faculty and levy societies needs to be streamlined so that it's faster with less turnaround time. So things have also been adapted so that audits are entirely online due to COVID, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from that. And this fall, audit turnaround will be typically around 5 business days, but up to 10 business days in some circumstances. Treasurer training was another piece of feedback that I had from last year, was that it should be expanded and offered more frequently. So since August, trainings have taken place weekly for constituent faculty and levy society treasurers, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from that. And I've also been offering bi-weekly general interest treasurer trainings, which have also been, I've gotten positive feedback from those as well. One of my other main goals for the summer and the fall was to improve our grant and bursary application process, which did continue during the COVID outbreak. And most of the applications, as well as the grant policy, have been updated. And we've had positive feedback from that. So member and society grant applications are currently open, as well as Accessibility Fund and International Student Emergency Bursary applications. The 2020-21 budget is another big project that I'll have this year. So we did revise the budget early this year due to COVID. And that happened in June. It's available on our website if you want to check it out. And I'm planning to begin consultation for next year's budget in December. And I'll be using feedback on services and priorities from the annual survey, as well as sending out another member survey and doing some hopefully in-person tabling at the sub, as well as getting input from council in reviewing last year's budget. And another main piece of feedback from my last term was that it would be helpful to have more kind of a central location for funding opportunities, both within and outside of the DSU. So that has not been finished just due to COVID. I had a lot of other things on my plate, but I have been collaborating with the VP internal, as well as some other society executives to get that going. And I'm hoping to have that done by the winter semester. As far as internal affairs go, other updates are that I've been involved with the building and health and safety logistics pertaining to COVID. So the sub is open, and I was very involved with implementing workplace safety measures as well as member safety measures for that. I've also had some oversight of services like the food bank, as well as the offices and the health plan since the beginning of my term in May. Part of my work in September has been planning the reopening stages of the sub. So we're currently in phase 1, hoping to move into phase 2 very soon. So currently we're operating under Dalhousie's COVID-19 capacity guidelines, which are definitely stricter than those of the province. So the Loaded Ladle and Tim Hortons are currently open, and we have 28 seats downstairs. So phase 2, we will be doubling the seating, so it'll be increased to 50 based on the provincial guidelines. And then future phases will be determined based on the provincial guidelines, input from our members and staff, as well as based on the number of cases we're seeing in the province. Grants Review Committee has been meeting regularly. We definitely haven't had as many member grant applications or society grant applications as we did last year, just due to COVID. But if you want a list of grants that have been approved for societies this year, you can find that in my report. As far as international student emergency bursaries, we've issued over $60,000 in emergency bursaries to international students since May. And the Budget and Finance Committee has also been meeting regularly in order to review our investments in accordance with the recently adopted responsible investment policy. And then just a quick update on campaigns and programming. We've been offering financial workshops with DSU or Dalhousie penny drops. So we've been hosting free financial literacy workshops open to our members. And we've had some positive feedback from that. There's another workshop coming up soon. And then as far as other programming, I was very involved in O Week, which we did pull off with some success, which was great. But the VPSL will give more of an update about that in his report. So now I will turn it over to our auditors. So again, if you do have questions about my report, they will wait till the end of the executive reports, but our auditors will be taking questions about the financial statements immediately following their report. So please do submit them now or as soon as you can if you have questions. The audited financial statements can be found on our website the link can be found just under where you found the executive reports. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chantal Cadeau. I'm the manager on the audit with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I'm just going to briefly run through our audit opinion and the main financial statements with some highlights. So with our, and I'm using them as a reference here myself. So with our audit report, we are stating that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the DSU as of March 31st, 2020, and in line with the accounting standards for a non-for-profit. So it's for the one year ending, and on the balance sheet in terms of highlights, so the cash position remains fairly consistent year over year. The largest receivable balance consistent with prior years is with the university itself. And for the cash itself, you'll see a restricted cash balance a bit higher this year, but again, it is in line with those are the health plan fees that are held and as received from students to cover health plan costs. The accounts payable balance has certainly decreased this year, but it's a matter of timing of payments, actually also related to health plan costs, where more was payable as at last year, a couple of months, as opposed to just the month of March was outstanding this year. It's the biggest driver. Moving on to the statement of revenues and expenses. So looking at the operating fund budget versus actual, the revenues are $400,000, kind of below what had been budgeted. From our perspective, we were seeing that mainly in the bar services. It's about a $250,000 decrease or below budget, driven by the closure last summer, about 2 months for the shutdown of the Greywood as the main driver there, resulting in, at the end of the day, of an operating loss in that fund of $150,000. And then there's also interest rate swap with the related third-party debt that the student union has, which is not a cash loss. It's not cash at the door for the DSU, but of $650,000 there as well. So the operating fund at the end of the day is showing as being expenses were greater than the revenues generated by $800,000. The next statement that we have there is the statement of changes in net assets, which is just rolling your opening net asset position from last year, incorporating the excess of expenses over revenues to end in the position for this year. The cash flow statement is not, I will say, cash balance, like I previously mentioned, is consistent year over year. The debt repayments have been made this year as scheduled. Some incremental renovations that have resulted in capital asset purchases that are a bit higher than last year, but otherwise, I don't think there's anything kind of too significant to note on the statement of cash flow otherwise. That was all I had in terms of highlights. Certainly, if anyone has questions, please feel free to raise them.
It doesn't look
Turn
like,
it back over.
it doesn't look like we have any questions. So if Isa has anything left to say?
Yeah. No, I do not have anything left to add. But I will take questions on my report after the other exec reports.
Oh, it seems that we actually have a question for the auditor. Let's just see here. Okay, so our question is, do you believe that we have the adequate risk management protocols in place given our size and scope as a large size NFP corporation? What can we do to improve our ability to manage risk? And this is coming from Mitchell Archibald.
Sorry, trying to get off mute. From our perspective, the financial statements were certainly as at the year-end date for March 31st, 2020. We certainly did perform some inquiries with management, given we're in a bit of a weird period here compared to the norm with COVID. Based on our discussions with management, they've had the updated budget, which we have done a bit of a review of, because from our perspective, the financial statements, and you'll see this in our opinion, are that management is using the going concern assumption, so that they will continue into the foreseeable future, and the basis of accounting that could potentially be used would differ if that was not the case. So we agree with the position that management has taken, certainly that the DSU has the funding to kind of weather the storm here in the foreseeable future. I hope that answers the question. I can speak at a high level, certainly, but I think if further detail would be needed, it's probably to turn back to the executive team. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions right now, but we'll just give a couple minutes in case there is anything else.
Yeah, so we'll just take just a couple minutes here, just wait for any questions, just to lay out the rest of the agenda here. We have, after this, the report of the Vice President Academic and External, and after that, the report of the Vice President Student Life. And just to remind everybody, all the documents that all the executive are referencing are on the website. So, the budget, all this stuff that's being referenced is all available. If anybody wants to have a look at it before they feel like they can formulate a question, this is all available on the DSU website. Okay, we have another question. And the question is, were all of your inquiries mitigated? And that is a question for the auditor, and that is from Mitchell Archibald.
Is it mitigated?
Yeah, so if by mitigated you mean, I think, hoping the question is, in any of our inquiries, we're certainly sufficed with the responses that were given back to us from management. Certainly we didn't do any detailed testing on the subsequent period, but based on reviewing just a brief review of the budget and the discussions that we had, it was considered sufficient from our perspective.
Thank you for that question and answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not seeing. Oh, so there is one question about the long-term debt. So section 8 in the auditor's document.
Okay. Okay, so sorry, let me just get the statements back here.
And just to state the question being asked, it says, please explain the long-term debt section 8 in the auditor's document.
Sure. So the student union has a non-revolving term loan with RBC. It's a 10-year term. It's repayable in 2026. So it's a 25-year amortization period for that loan. There's annual interest payments and principal payments that are made. The principal payments are outlined in the schedule that's included there. And as I suggested, the repayments made in the current year were exactly as specified in the schedule. There are no specific financial covenants that are required by the debt, but certainly a requirement of the debt is to have these audited financial statements every year. And certainly the DSU has complied with any of those requirements. Thank you.
I will also add, I'm not sure if the question was at all pertaining to what the debt was incurred for, but it was taken out in 2016, so several years ago, to fund the renovation of the student union building. I'm not seeing any other questions for the auditors, so I think I will turn it back over to you, Jamie.
Alrighty. So we'd just like to thank our auditor for coming in and for answering everybody's questions. So next we're going to move on to the report of the Vice President, Academic and External. So that is Erica, and Erica, you go ahead.
Thank you, Jamie. Hello, everyone. So just to go over my report in brief, like the other executives have, since I started my term at the beginning of May, I've sat on several committees. I chair the external committee. So far, we have been focusing on introductions for our new members, as well as several issues. These issues include support for Indigenous major and honors program that is currently being developed by a working group of faculty and students. We've also been talking a lot about education and tuition specifically. The committee has helped to guide some of the decisions that we've made in our Reject the Three and Nova Scotia Needs student rallies. So that input has been very helpful. As many of you know, the external committee is open, so we're always taking new members who are interested. If there are things you'd like to talk about, then please feel free to join and we can talk about that. This summer, I've also been busy helping to develop content for O-Week. This included the Your Education, Your Rights video, as well as the Welcome to Halifax video, which were two great projects. You can find them online at dsu.ca. Other things I've done, I've sat on the hiring committee for the DSU market. I sit on the International Students Emergency Bursary Fund Committee, the Equity and Accessibility COVID-19 Relief Fund, and the Accessibility Fund Committee. Along with our VPSL JAD, I've also been kind of co-managing the SHINE projects with the help of our events commissioner and campaigns commissioner. So Shinerama, for those of you who don't know, is an organization focused on providing relief for cystic fibrosis as well as research. So we have been investigating ways that we can run fundraisers and events to support SHINE, even with COVID, so that we can do COVID safe things. One thing that we did earlier this summer was a bottle drive. We restricted it to large businesses. That way we could get the large boxes of bottles and bring them directly to the plant instead of touching individual bottles from different people. We didn't think that would be COVID safe. So the box bottles from restaurants in the city was a success. We were very happy with that. Moving on to university affairs and committees, I've been working on a few projects. So I've been talking to the admissions department about changing some of their language in the admissions forms to be more inclusive. I've also been sitting on the Open Educational Resources Committee. This committee is concerned with providing free textbooks and educational resources for students because we all know that's a very large fee in addition to tuition. The University of PEI Student Union recently had a very large breakthrough. Their provincial government awarded them $25,000 for a project for the student union to administer to profs for grants for these projects. So we're investigating ways that we can develop a similar proposal. There is an Atlantic Council concerned with OER, and they were recently awarded $35,000, but that is for the entire province. I will be giving a presentation to Senate at the next meeting about OER and its benefits. One thing I've noticed in the last few months advocating for OER is that many professors aren't aware of it. There's a lot of copyright concerns. There's also concerns about the dispensability, for lack of a better word, about professors if they develop entire resources or class modules that are online and open, about how much the university still needs them. This is especially a concern for contract employees that work semester to semester and don't have a longer employment at the university. So that's currently ongoing with OER. I've also been working with the Vice Provost of Student Affairs about the ombudsperson. We did have an ombudsperson a few years ago, but they were left. A report called the Stropa Report was created to recognize the issues in how the previous ombudsperson was managed and what improvements can be made moving forwards with a new hire. I'm really excited to say that in the last few weeks, we have resolved all major areas of contention between the DSU and DAL that were preventing us from assembling the advisory committee and having discussions about how to address other recommendations made in the report. So that committee, as soon as everyone is appointed, will begin meeting at the end of October. I think the date was set today for October 23rd. So that's exciting. I'm really excited with that. I've also been sitting on the Code of Student Conduct Review Committee. That committee has been doing a lot of work, as it sounds, updating the Student Code of Conduct. The current form doesn't include things like social media or marijuana. It's just very outdated. So it's having a revision. I am the student representation there. In the next couple of months, it is scheduled to have a public review, so public consultation. So students and community members will be able to provide their feedback on that. Along with our VP internal, Hannah, who gave her report earlier, I do also sit on OCRED, which is concerned with the academic unit consolidation, renaming, establishment, termination, or transfer of academic units. So that just looks like changing degrees around, changing buildings, redefining what something looks like when it no longer makes sense academically, structurally at our university. I've also been working with a group of students from the School of Architecture about a racist incident in an architecture classroom in the summer of 2019. This group is called Where is Dalhousie? They do have a website and an Instagram. Our primary concern is how Dalhousie holds professors, faculty, and even students accountable for racist incidents that happen on campus. A focus on everyone's mind this year are equity, diversity, and inclusion principles. There's a lot of conversations about retention and recruitment, but accountability is a conversation that we feel is lacking, just because incidents that happen on campus don't always seem to be resolved to everyone's satisfaction, and that's something that we would definitely like to address. And two more things I've been working on. One is the Senate Caucus. We established the Student Senate Caucus, which is a group very similar to Council for those of you who don't know. It includes a representative from every faculty as well as community members. This caucus reviews the agenda of Senate before every meeting and discusses the outcomes as well. Its primary focus is making sure that all students have a say in what's happening at Senate, because we only have 11 seats while we have about 17 different groups, faculty and community again, that should be represented. We've received a lot of really great feedback about our caucus this year, which I'm really happy about. All the students are very engaged and a very, very strong group. So I'm very happy about that. Another project I've been working on, again with our BPSL JAD, is the student ratings of course content. So we're in the middle of developing a proposal that's very similar to the student ratings of instruction, but it's focused on course content. So what we'd like to do is provide an opportunity for students to anonymously provide feedback on their course content, specifically again on EDI principles, equity, diversity, and inclusion principles. We want to know if students feel like the perspectives that they're seeing in their classes are comprehensive, if they're seeing, if it's history, if they're seeing all sides of the argument or the story, or even if it's science, if they're reading works from BIPOC authors, writers, scientists, or if things are only from one perspective. We're currently in consultation with many, many faculty and senior administration members. We're hoping to bring this to the Senate Learning and Teaching Committee in November, but this will definitely continue to be a year-long project. Those are all the major points in my update. To quickly go over my goals, when I was running this year, a lot of my goals focused on very tangible on-campus action items. Because of COVID and its nature, and because of the feedback I've heard from other people, it seemed best to redirect into other things. Things like the student ratings of course content, where people can talk about the spaces in their classroom that will lead to change, but not looking at the classroom directly because everyone's online. So it's hard to modify that that space when that space is virtual. So it has been redirected to other ways. So this semester I've been very focused on Nova Scotia Needs Students Rally. The two primary goals for that campaign are for a tuition freeze and to increase academic funding to post-secondary institutions, and these asks are aimed at the provincial government. The student ratings of course content are a big focus for me, as well as supporting that Indigenous major proposal to have that major and honors program on campus. Moving into the winter semester, I will be redirecting some of my advocacy efforts onto open educational resources. I'm hoping after the educational piece is completed this semester, we can more move into get the ball rolling a little bit faster and have some of these topics and courses content designed to be free. I think that'll also help with some of the burden of tuition. Definitely not the same thing, but if any money can be taken off of student debt, then let's go for that. I will also be, it's to be determined how big of a part, but I will be supporting the planning of the Racial Justice Symposium. That is an annual event that was supposed to have its second run last year, but unfortunately because of COVID, I believe it was canceled. So we'll be trying for a kind of second, kind of third run this year. Hopefully the SRCCs will be going to Senate, and I would like to advocate for improved and culturally appropriate and supported mental health resources, because along with equity, diversity, and inclusion principles, culturally appropriate mental health resources is a very big topic that's come up frequently with my student consultation this semester. That's all I have, so back to you, Jamie. Thank you for tuning in.
Jamie, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Erica. So last but not least, we'll be moving on to our final executive report, and this will be the report of the Vice President Student Life. So Jad, you go ahead.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you all for being here. I'm just going to start off with what my goals were at the beginning of my term. These are literally straight out of my campaign promises, and they have been guiding me through this year. So one of the first topic was safety, and I campaigned a lot on emotional and physical and spiritual safety. For the emotional mental safety, through all the events that we're doing, we're cooperating with Dalhousie and the Dalhousie ambassadors, who are all trained with first aid and with mental health support, which are really great. I've committed to continue all the work of the previous executive, Ruby Coles. She's done a lot of great work. I'll talk more about the groups that I'm working with later in this report. And I'm working on creating spaces where students can study together and work together on campus to reduce the stress that comes with studies online. So that's an ongoing conversation to find a safe COVID-friendly spaces, and I'll talk about that later as well. With physical safety, this is more important than ever. It has been an integral part of our planning, and is to maintain that all of the events are COVID safe, COVID friendly, and so on. There are quite a few restrictions that we process through each event. I don't want to get through them all, but they've been number one. One of my promises was to work on building a safe drinking environment on campus. and we're working on that. There's been a liquor ban until October 15th. So once that is lifted, those are conversations that we'll be having with administration and specifically the Student Affairs Office. And of course, at each event to have first aid and sort of safe spaces around the event, which we have been doing. For inclusivity, I'm working with groups on campus such as BUSA and DSU coordinate programming. We've already done our first BUSA on the block party during O Week, which is the first time that's ever happened, which is great. I've also reached out to organizations to make sure that I'm supporting their programming to ensure that that at least my office is an open space for all groups on campus. My last point is on fun. Of course, my position is primarily taken up by programming, and the best way to make good programming is to make it fun. I promised a lot about big events during my campaign, but again, that was before COVID. So that has taken a hit. We're still working on maintaining the safety of the students. So that means we can't have events as big as I would have wanted, but seeing how well O Week went and as an outdoor activity, I'm looking to have some bigger events that I'll talk about in later in my report about how we're going to manage that on outdoor larger events. And along with that, we're focusing more on small events. So that was also as part of my campaign, more activities, and that is what we're doing really well. Throughout the year we've done so far, we've organized multiple small activities for O Week as an opportunity for students to participate in their community. In the future, we'll be planning small activities and outdoors, and that's what we're relying on. So that is something that you'll see a lot of. And my last campaign promise was depoliticization. And so that I'm trying to work with every group to prioritize the safety and the experience for students at Dalhousie. And those are all things that I've been working towards. Some I've achieved, some that we're still working on. Moving forward, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been doing outside of my position or in the community. The first one, I've been reaching out to a lot of students, opening myself up in the student life sort of field to our community. And so, of course, I'm the chair of the Student Life Committee. So far, we've met. There's still seats. It's an open committee, so feel free to join. We're always looking for more students to help plan the events. We've already met, and we're started planning our October activities. And I'll speak about that at the end of my presentation and upcoming events. I'm also working with the Res Life, Student Affairs, and Maddie Stinson on the Appeals Committee. This is an especially hard year when it comes to all the regulations that are happening on campus. And so Maddie and I are trying to represent the students as best as we can to make sure that they are well protected. It's a tough experience to have to appeal for your case, and we're trying to make sure that the committee we have the students back on this committee. I'm also on, as I said earlier about mental health, I'm on the Healthy Minds Nova Scotia committee, which is a wonderfully complex group of amazing mental health professionals who meet to discuss how to help not just in Halifax or Dalhousie, but in all of Nova Scotia, which is great. So I'm continuing that work. This is something that Ruby Coles had set up, and I'm continuing it. When it comes to Shinorama, Erica had already spoken on this, but we're working together. There's there's an event coming up pretty soon. I'll talk about again at the end of the report. And of course, Eric already spoke about this, but the SRCCs. So moving forward, I'm going to talk about what I've done so far and then what I'm planning on doing in the future. So one of my plans was to plan O Week. We're doing that, first ever extended O Week. It's been a very unique process to organize and to plan everything that we have, but it's been very successful. I think that we've been able to pull off what a lot of universities couldn't have, and we came out of the O Week period with little to no cases, which is I'm very proud of the whole team here. So that worked out. I want to incorporate harm reduction, and that we've been working with DalSafe and the DalSafe team to accomplish, the Dal security team to accomplish that, and I'm very happy for that. And then we've been working on setting up sort of supports around campus for mental health. And of course, I'm trying to keep in contact with students and understanding what their issues are. So that's all part of what I've been doing leading up. And of course, transitioning to this position was took up some time so far. In the future, we're working on, we're still continuing the O Week extended edition, I guess, till the end of next week. So that's still happening. We're planning on doing some campaigns, especially during exam seasons, where we're offering study halls, which like opening spaces on campus for study halls, snacks, bringing some animals on campus, which would be really great. I think last year they brought some, there's a pony, put him in front of the Killam, and it was one of the best experiences that I could have walking out of the Killam. I'd love to do something like that again. So those are things that we're working, so sort of stress relievers, giving out snacks, coffee, whatever we can to make the online exam experience a little bit easier. We're working on collaborating with the LGBTQ+ communities to organize activities and sort of programming that we weren't able to do this summer, or like when it's while it's still warm out. So that's something that we're planning on doing. I would love during reading week and times where a lot of students leave to be with their families, and I want to create some sort of community meal programs for students, especially at times during traditional holidays. For students who don't participate in those holidays, I want to make sure that they have some community, and that the Dalhousie community can come around them during these some lonesome times. And of course, I'm running the Movember campaign in November. I'm really excited for this. I've got quite a few plans for my mustache, and I'm excited to see all the mustaches that come out and all the community that gets together to raise for an amazing campaign. This is just all for the fall semester. Now, for the winter semester, traditionally we would have Frost Week at the beginning of January, but since it's very cold and we can't do it indoors to all the students, we're considering doing a sort of alteration to that, a Frost Week being a series of activities outdoors, little community events. So that's in the works. We're trying to, there's no limit to what we can do except put 500 people in one room. So we're trying to maneuver around to make everybody safe. So that's still being figured out. Collaborating with the communities on an organization around Halifax, specifically during the African Heritage Month, and trying to support initiatives and make a space where those communities can come around and embrace their culture. Collaborating with the TEDx team, the Dalhousie TEDx team, to put on another TEDx event at Dalhousie in February. So we're working with that. And traditionally, we'd have DalFest at the beginning of the year, right after O Week. But since that wasn't an option for us with COVID, we're going to try and collaborate and combine that with the last class bash at the end of the year. So all of the favorite events that you guys loved will still happen in just a different timely manner. And then, of course, all throughout winter semester, we're doing the mental health exam and school de-stressing activities that we all know and love. That's the end of my report. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you ever want to join the Student Life Committee, that's open. I'm going to speak a little bit of upcoming dates. As I said, November is November campaign, so there's going to be fundraising activities for that. In October, also in November, during the reading week, there'll be community meals. In October, the SLC is currently planning a sort of pumpkin carving contest. It's going to be 2 days, it's going to be outdoors, it's going to be all safe, workstations and everything. So that's in the process, that's in the works. I'm really excited for. All the activities that we're going to have this year, all the events and the programs, we're going to try as much as we can to keep them outdoors or just have smaller, more intimate programming. So if you have any suggestions on something that you'd like to happen on campus, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, so that is the last of our executive reports. What we're going to get into now is our question and answer period. And we're going to begin with some questions that have already been put through in the chat. So the first question is for our DSU president, and it's from Mitchell Archibald. And I'm going to read this question. It's a multi-part question, and Maddie will just kind of iterate where she is in the question as she speaks. So in terms of CFS and our relationship with them, will the DSU be participating in any CFS activities over the course of the coming year? Will the CFS be participating in any, oh, sorry, it was written twice, I apologize. Have there been any payments or fees of any kind paid to CFS by the DSU in the last 24 months? Of the current DSU senior staff, executives, and council, how many hold or have held formal positions with CFS at the provincial or national level? Have any members of DSU senior staff, executive, or council declared upon a conflict of interest pertaining to any dealings with CFS? If so, who? And have the DSU bylaws been followed consistently over the last 12 months in respect to our potential relationship with CFS? So Maddie is going to speak to that.
Hi, thanks for this question. Excuse me, well, I'm just going to read through and answer question by question. But to answer your first question, will the DSU be participating in CFS activities, and will CFS be participating in any DSU activities? We don't have any current plans for any joint partnerships, so the membership is welcome to observe what CFS is doing and their campaigns, but I don't think our executive has any, I can say with certainty, we don't have any current plans to work with CFS. The next, have there been any payments or fees of any kind paid to CFS by the DSU in the last 24 months? To the best of my knowledge, no. We haven't made any payments towards CFS, so no student fees have been given to CFS. And none of our current senior staff, executive, or council, to the best of my knowledge, and I can say this for certain with our staff and executives, that there are no currently held positions with the CFS, and there are no affiliations that would constitute as a conflict of interest between CFS, our executives, and our staff. The next is, have the DSU bylaws been followed consistently over the last 12 months in respect to our potential relationship with CFS? So last year, the DSU did seek legal opinion on our prospective membership with CFS, and that legal opinion found that the DSU bylaws wouldn't prevent us from becoming prospective members of CFS. But besides the point, our priority is making sure that like a fair and information-based, unbiased referendum can go forward. So I can clarify by saying that should a referendum be held, which is the intention, that referendum question would be posed by the DSU Council, of which the DSU executives do not hold a majority or any overwhelming power on. So there would be no opportunity for an executive theoretically to influence that referenda. And the same goes for staff. In any referendum question and election period, there is a very distinct and intentional space left between the elections committee, the CRO, and our staff and executives, so there's no opportunity for bias or intervention in the elections. So if you're concerned about anything to do with the referendum, anything to do with that, I would encourage you to reach out to our policy and governance coordinator or the CRO for questions. But I think that answers everything. The moral of this story is that we are looking forward to an unbiased and accountable voting process to allow our members to decide how they want the DSU to move forward with CFS. Thank you.
Alrighty, so we're going to move on to our next question from Ankit Bajaj. Do you think early repayment, and this is going to be addressed to our BPFO, I apologize. Do you think early repayment would be viable keeping the fiscal budget in mind? And so this is going to Isa.
Hi, folks. So this is not something that's currently on our radar. So the loan period was calculated very carefully back in 2014, which was when the renovations, when the fiscal possibility was starting to be investigated. And I obviously wasn't part of that process, but I do know that we continue to investigate and just keep on top of our repayments and status of the loan throughout the year. So in order to repay the loan early, we would have to dip into student fees collected for our services and operating budget. And I don't think that's something I'm comfortable speaking on the possibility of, both due to COVID and because I really do believe in doing extensive consultation with our membership before making any drastic changes to our operating budget like that would be. So we will obviously continue to reassess the situation and the feasibility year to year if there was demand from our membership to repay the loan early. But thank you for that question.
Okay, we're just going to see if we have any further questions. Let's see here. Okay, yes, we do. Okay, so this is a question from Mitchell Archibald, and this is going to go to Maddie as well. As a follow-up, Maddie spoke specifically about there being no CFS conflicts or affiliations with executives or staff. Can the chair of council confirm the same thing for all current members of council? Thank you so much for your answers. I know there have been a lot of questions. So thank you for your questions, Mitchell. I personally don't follow this sort of stuff within council, so I'm actually not aware of affiliations with CFS. So yeah, this isn't really something that I'm particularly involved in. But if you have any further questions, I'm sure that we can find somebody to answer them. Maddie may be able to speak to this if there's anything else, but I mean, I believe that she did touch on the answer to this question.
Yeah, I think I can just clarify a little bit. Sorry, I do have the tendency to not speak in definite terms. It's just a thing that I do sometimes. But I will say, to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe that any of our counselors have any current affiliation that would constitute a conflict of interest when it comes to CFS. That being said, I can't say that I've delved into the personal backgrounds of all of these people because that would be wildly inappropriate of me to do. So, to the best of my knowledge, the answer is no. I don't think it's something that our membership should be too concerned about. But that being said, if you really would like me to follow up on that, just feel free to email us and we can look into things further for you. Thanks.
We're just going to give it a minute, see if there's any further questions. So what we might do is just move on to the next item on our agenda, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So the next item on the agenda is announcements, and these will be done by the DSU President, Maddie.
So our most major announcement right now is the DSU by-election, which I mentioned earlier. So the by-election will be open for nominations on October 5th. So you are welcome to send in a nomination for any of the open positions. And if you're looking for more information, please go to dsu.ca/elections. You can see there all of the rules for the elections, how to nominate yourself, how to get involved, and what openings there are. So I would encourage you, no matter what year you are or if you've been involved with the DSU before, I would really encourage you to get involved because we definitely want to have those seats filled. And then, like I said, voting is later on in October. So dsu.ca/elections. If you have any questions, you can email our policy and governance coordinator or the CRO, and they will be happy to answer those for you. Other than that, there are a lot of notable DAL dates coming up, fall break. The sub will be closing for the winter term on December 18th, which is a large FYI, very far in advance, but in case anyone was wondering. And I think that is it. Oh, besides the spring AGM. So I mentioned that earlier as well, but we will be holding a spring AGM this year to notice amendments to the bylaws. So if you have any concerns about the bylaws, would like to notice anything, please email me and I can bring those potential amendments or thoughts and concerns forward to the Bylaw and Policy Review Committee. So that's it from us. Like I said, feel free to email us with any questions. We're really thankful for everyone who came out and asked questions and paid attention. So thanks so much.
Okay, so we are just going to see if there are any further questions. We might just give it a few minutes. There's potentially maybe another announcement that we might take the time to make since we're not getting any questions currently. So we'll actually send it over to Erica just because she has an announcement. Since we don't have any questions currently, we're going to discuss an event coming up.
Hello, everyone. Just a little plug for our event in 2 weeks. We are holding a Nova Scotia Needs Student Rally, which talks about the two asks of the provincial government that we mentioned before, those being a tuition freeze and increased funding for academic institutions. We made a whole bunch of really great signs, and it's going to be great. And there are speakers. The DFA is coming. We've invited local MLAs as well as mayoral candidates. Don't know if they're coming yet, but we'll know soon. So definitely come on out. I know tuition is a huge issue for our community and that many people are disproportionately affected because of the systemic issues that exist at Dalhousie and in Halifax. The more support, the better. We can all benefit from this. Hopefully it'll be a fun and engaging day, even if it's touching a topic that isn't one that we love. So yeah, back to you, Jamie.
All right, so it seems we have a couple of questions coming in. So first, we have another question from Ankit. So what initiatives are being taken with respect to effective feedback and communication from the DSU membership? And we're going to send that over to Hannah to have a chance to answer that question.
Okay, hello. So like I had said in my report, we did get quite a lot of feedback from our annual survey, and that is going to be posted later, probably closer to November, once our graphics and full report are officially drafted, but within the month, I'm sure. So we did get quite a bit of feedback from our constituents that way in terms of feedback, but with communication. We do get quite a number of requests through our social medias regularly, and communication to the DSU executives through our emails is pretty consistent as well. If I know you said except emails, but other than that, communication with our socials is one of our main besides emails. If there is something that I'm not quite touching on maybe in your question, please let me know. But in general, for feedback, it's mainly through our emails and our social platforms.
And we're actually just going to go back to Erica really quickly just to announce the date of that rally.
I'm really sorry, I didn't say that the rally will be on October 14th from 1 to 3 p.m. outside Province House on Granville Street. That is very important information if you want to come to a rally. Also, to add a little more to Ankit's question, we have really several surveys regarding tuition that also helped to guide our response. And there's been several consultation meetings with students about things like where is Del Arch, talking about how faculty and specifically administration can respond and be accountable when faculty do something that they definitely shouldn't have done. A lot of that engagement came from students. Our council and our Senate caucus, as I mentioned earlier, have also been very engaged this year and have brought us a lot of feedback from their constituents. So they've been a really great source of communication. Back to you, Jamie.
All right, we have another question. This one is for Maddie. So it is regarding elections. Due to COVID, how do we get the required signatures for the nominations? And this question is coming from Kenneth Chicard.
This is a great question. As some people might be aware, through council, we did just rewrite our elections and referenda policy. So there are a lot of new things in there. But something similar to last year's is that we give the authority to the elections committee to make any new rules that might be required for an election. So due to the intentional degree of separation between an executive and staff during the elections period, the new rules on how required signatures would be obtained, how online campaigning will work, how in-person campaigning regulations will work, will all come from our elections committee. So if you are a potential nominee thinking about becoming a candidate, I would encourage you again to reach out to our CRO or our elections committee, and a lot of the information on how to reach those folks and how to get involved to get those questions answered will be coming out on our socials quite shortly. So stay tuned for that, and I promise the information will be there shortly. Thank you.
Alrighty, let's see if we have any further questions. That's all the business on the agenda for today. So we'll just give it maybe 5 minutes just to see, just to account for delay and see if anybody has any final questions before we end the meeting. And just an aside about election forms, these can be digitally signed through PDFs, and those forms are available. I might just put it in the chat for everybody. Those forms are available at dcu.ca/elections. And so that'll help facilitate that online sort of election period. And any questions about elections or the election period or doing the online forms, getting them signed, can go to the CRO, the Chief Returning Officer, and their email is dsucro@dal.ca. So it doesn't look like we have any further questions. Of course, as usual, all of our executive email addresses are on the DSU website. So if any questions come up after the meeting for anything that was addressed in the meeting or otherwise, please feel free to reach out. And we just have, just as a lovely little way to end the meeting, a nice comment from Mitchell Archibald. You all did a great job. Thank you for taking the time, even for such a small group of students. It is really appreciated. So that looks like that's going to be the end of our meeting today. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, all the council members for making themselves available, and our auditor for coming in and taking the time to speak and go over the financial situation with us. So yeah, thanks everybody for attending the DSU's AGM. We are a small but mighty group, and everybody did very well.